All right, breaking news for you now. An appeals court has just ruled in favor of E. Jean Carroll in her $83 million defamation lawsuit against President Trump. The court ruled against the president's attempt to throw the case out entirely. He had argued that he deserved presidential immunity given the timing of the original verdict, which you recall happened back in January of 2024. Carroll claimed her reputation was
Okay, so Trump just made a deal with Lebanon and Israel, a 10-day ceasefire, and Republicans are absolutely losing their minds because this isn't just some normal diplomatic agreement. This is Trump potentially handing Hezbollah, a terrorist organization backed by Iran, 10 days to regroup, rearm, and prepare for the next round of fighting. And GOP hawks are looking at this deal and saying, what are you doing? We've been fighting Iran and its proxies for weeks. We're on the verge of potentially winning. And now you're giving them a break. You're letting them catch their breath. This could be catastrophic. And Trump, he's trying to spin it as a path to lasting peace, but nobody's buying it. Not his allies, not his critics, not even some Republicans who usually defend everything he does. Because this deal looks weak, it looks rushed. And it looks like Trump is trying to get out of a conflict he started but can't finish. Here's what happened. On April 16, 2026, Trump announced a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. He brokered it through separate phone calls with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and Lebanese President Aoun. The ceasefire went into effect at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, which was midnight local time, and Trump immediately posted on True Social celebrating it. He framed this as a major diplomatic victory, a step toward lasting peace in the Middle East. But within hours the deal was already falling apart. Lebanon's army reported Israeli shelling violations by Friday morning. Netanyahu said Israeli forces would stay in southern Lebanon during the ceasefire. Hezbollah supported the deal but wasn't directly party to the agreement, which means they're not technically bound by it. And Republicans started asking, what exactly did we just agree to? Because this ceasefire came after 6 weeks of intense fighting between Israel and Hezbollah, fighting that killed over 2,000 people. Fighting that was part of Trump's broader confrontation with Iran. And now, right when pressure was mounting, right when the 60-day war powers clock is ticking toward a May deadline, Trump calls a timeout and GOP hawks are saying this looks like retreat. This looks like Trump couldn't finish what he started, so he's trying to pause the conflict and hope everyone forgets about it before the midterms. But before we go any further, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why independent voices matter, to bring real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, it's important to seek out diverse perspectives that challenge the dominant narratives pushed by big outlets. All right, let's get back to the core of this issue. Let's talk about why this deal is so controversial. First, the timing. This ceasefire comes right as the war powers deadline is approaching. Congress passed the War Powers Resolution decades ago to limit how long presidents can wage war without congressional approval. And Trump has been operating under that 60-day window since he started military operations against Iran and his proxies. That deadline is coming up in May. And if Trump doesn't either get congressional authorization or end the conflict, he's in violation of federal law. So what does he do? He brokers a ceasefire. He pauses the fighting and suddenly the war powers clock becomes less urgent because he's not actively waging war during a ceasefire. It's a delay tactic and Republicans can see it. Second, what Hezbollah gets out of this. A 10-day ceasefire gives Hezbollah time to regroup, to move weapons, to reinforce positions, to plan their next moves. Israel has been hammering Hezbollah for 6 weeks. They've been degrading their capabilities. They've been putting pressure on their command structure. And now Trump is giving them 10 days to recover. That's a gift. A massive strategic gift to a terrorist organization. And for what? A photo op at the White House? A chance for Trump to claim he's a peacemaker? GOP hawks are furious because they see this as Trump snatching defeat from the jaws of potential victory. Third, the broader Iran situation. This ceasefire with Lebanon and Hezbollah is happening while Trump is also dealing with a fragile truce with Iran. And those two things are connected because Hezbollah is an Iranian proxy. They take orders from Tehran. They get weapons and funding from Iran. So when Trump makes a deal with Lebanon that benefits Hezbollah, he's really making a deal that benefits Iran. And Republicans who wanted to see Trump take a hard line against Iran, they're watching him give concessions, and they're not happy about it, because this doesn't look like strength. This looks like Trump trying to de-escalate conflicts he can't win before they become political disasters in the midterms. And that's the real issue here. Trump started this whole confrontation with Iran. He ordered strikes on Iranian nuclear sites. He escalated tensions. He brought the region to the brink of war. And now he's trying to walk it back because he's realized the political costs are too high. His approval is tanking. Republicans are nervous about the midterms. Democrats are using the endless Middle East escalations against him. And Trump needs a way out. So he's making deals, quick deals, rush deals, deals that give concessions to America's enemies in exchange for a temporary pause that lets Trump claim victory and move on. That's what this Lebanon ceasefire is, and Republicans are attacking it because they can see through it. Let's dig deeper into what's actually in this deal and why it's causing such a firestorm within Trump's own party. Because this isn't just Democrats criticizing Trump. This is Republicans, people who usually support him. People who defend his foreign policy looking at this Lebanon ceasefire and saying this is a mistake, this is weak, this could backfire catastrophically. And the fact that Trump is getting attacked from his own side, that's a really bad sign for him politically. Let's start with the mechanics of the deal. Trump brokered the ceasefire through separate phone calls with Netanyahu and Lebanese President Aoun. Notice separate calls, not a joint negotiation, not a summit where all parties sit down together. Separate calls where Trump presumably promised each side something different. That's not a recipe for a lasting agreement. That's a recipe for a deal that falls apart as soon as the parties actually talk to each other and realize they were promised contradictory things. The ceasefire went into effect at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on April 16th. That's midnight local time in the Middle East and is supposed to last 10 days. During that time, Israel and Lebanon are supposed to stop fighting. Hezbollah is supposed to stand down and everyone is supposed to work toward a more permanent peace agreement. That's the theory. But the reality, it started falling apart within hours. Lebanon's army reported that Israel violated the ceasefire with shelling by Friday morning. Netanyahu said Israeli forces would remain in southern Lebanon during the ceasefire, which Lebanon probably didn't agree to. Hezbollah, the actual fighting force on the Lebanese side, isn't even a direct party to the agreement. They support it, but they didn't sign anything. They're not bound by it. They can violate it whenever they want and claim it wasn't really their deal to begin with. So, already less than 24 hours in, the ceasefire is shaky. Israel is still shelling. Their troops are still in Lebanon. Hezbollah isn't formally committed, and both sides are probably using these 10 days to prepare for the next round of fighting, rather than actually working toward peace. That's not a ceasefire. That's a timeout, a chance for everyone to catch their breath before going at it again. And Republicans are asking, why do we agree to this? What do we get out of it? And the answer seems to be nothing. Israel didn't agree to withdraw its forces. Lebanon didn't agree to disarm Hezbollah. Hezbollah didn't agree to anything because they're not a party to the deal. There's no enforcement mechanism, no consequences for violations, no plan for what happens after the 10 days are up. It's just pause for 10 days and hope something good happens. That's not a strategy. That's wishful thinking. And Republicans who wanted to see Trump take a strong stance against Iranian proxies, they're looking at this and thinking, we just gave Hezbollah a free pass to regroup for nothing in return. Now, let's talk about the context. This ceasefire didn't happen in isolation. It's part of Trump's broader Iran strategy, which is also falling apart. Trump ordered strikes on Iranian nuclear sites earlier in his term. He escalated tensions with Tehran. He brought the region to the brink of war, and initially Republicans supported it. They wanted to see Trump take a hard line against Iran. They wanted to see him confront Iranian aggression. But then things started going wrong. The strikes didn't fully destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities. Intelligence gaps emerged. The conflict dragged on longer than expected. Casualties mounted, and suddenly what looked like decisive action started looking like another endless Middle East war that America can't win. And Trump's approval started dropping. Americans are tired of Middle East conflicts. They're tired of seeing U.S. forces deployed overseas. They're tired of the cost, both financial and human. And Trump's whole pitch in his second term was supposed to be America first, staying out of foreign entanglements, bringing troops home. But instead, he's gotten America deeper into another Middle East conflict, and voters are not happy about it. That's showing up in polls. That's showing up in special election results. That's showing up in Trump's sliding approval numbers. And Republicans looking at the midterms are getting nervous. So Trump needs a way out. He needs to de-escalate. He needs to create some distance between himself and the Iran conflict before it becomes a major liability in November. And that's what this Lebanon ceasefire is really about. It's not about peace. It's not about protecting Israel. It's not about defeating Hezbollah. It's about giving Trump political cover. He can say, look, I'm working toward peace. I brokered a ceasefire. I'm bringing stability to the region. and then he can quietly let the conflict fade from the headlines and hope voters forget about it by the time they go to the polls. But Republicans can see through this. They know this isn't about strategy, it's about politics. And they're worried about two things. First, that the ceasefire makes Trump look weak, that it looks like he started a conflict he couldn't finish, that he talked tough on Iran, but then had to back down when things got difficult. And weakness is toxic in Republican politics. The base doesn't forgive leaders who look weak. So Republicans are worried that Trump's attempt to de-escalate is going to cost him with his own supporters. Second, that this actually makes the situation worse. Because if you give Hezbollah 10 days to regroup and then the fighting starts again, you're in a worse position than before. Hezbollah uses that time to move weapons, to reinforce defensive positions, to plan better attacks. And when the ceasefire ends, Israel faces a stronger enemy than they would have if the fighting had just continued. So, you've traded short-term political relief for long-term strategic disadvantage. And Republicans are saying that's a terrible trade. That's putting Trump's political interest ahead of actual national security. There are already cracks showing in Republican unity on this. The Senate blocked the Democratic War Powers Resolution on April 14th, just 2 days before the ceasefire. That resolution would have forced Trump to seek congressional authorization for continued military action. Republicans blocked it, showing they were still backing Trump's Iran strategy. But even then, there were defections. Some Republicans voted with Democrats. Others expressed concerns privately. The vote showed that GOP support for Trump's Middle East adventures was getting shaky. And now with this ceasefire that looks weak and rushed, that support is getting even shakier. Because here's the political calculation Republicans are making. They supported Trump's tough talk on Iran because they thought it would play well with voters. Strength, decisiveness, standing up to America's enemies. But if the result is an endless conflict that Americans don't support, followed by a weak-looking ceasefire that gives concessions to terrorists, then the political benefit disappears. Suddenly supporting Trump's Iran policy becomes a liability, something Democrats can attack them for in campaigns. And Republicans in competitive districts are starting to think, do I really want to keep defending this? Do I want to tie myself to a foreign policy that looks increasingly unsuccessful? And it gets worse when you consider the war powers deadline. Trump has 60 days to conduct military operations without congressional authorization. That deadline is approaching in May. And Trump has two options. Either get Congress to authorize continued action or end the conflict. Getting congressional authorization right now probably not happening. Democrats control enough votes to block it, and some Republicans are wavering. So Trump's only real option is to end the conflict, or at least pause it long enough that the war powers deadline becomes moot. And that's what this ceasefire does. It's a legal tactic disguised as diplomacy, a way for Trump to avoid having to either get congressional approval or violate federal law. But using ceasefires to game the War Powers Act, that's exactly the kind of thing that makes Congress angry because it undermines their constitutional authority over war and peace. It treats the War Powers Resolution, which was passed to prevent presidents from waging endless wars without approval, as just another rule to be gamed and worked around. And even Republicans who support Trump generally don't like seeing their institutional authority diminished. So there's frustration building even among Trump's allies in Congress. Frustration that he's making foreign policy decisions based on legal deadlines and political calendars rather than actual strategic considerations. Okay, so let's bring this all together and talk about what this catastrophic deal really means. Because it's not just about one ceasefire agreement. It's about Trump's entire approach to foreign policy collapsing under the weight of political pressure and poor planning. And it's about Republicans starting to abandon him on an issue, national security, where they usually give presidents wide latitude. That's significant. That's a sign that Trump's political support is eroding, even in areas where he used to be strongest. Let's break this down into 3 key points. First, the strategic catastrophe. This ceasefire is terrible strategy. It gives Hezbollah, a terrorist organization, 10 days to regroup without giving Israel or the U.S. anything meaningful in return. It doesn't disarm Hezbollah. It doesn't remove them from southern Lebanon. It doesn't even require them to formally agree to the ceasefire since they're not a direct party. It just pauses the fighting. And in military terms, that's a gift to the weaker side. Israel was winning. They were degrading Hezbollah's capabilities. They were maintaining pressure. And now Trump has given Hezbollah time to recover, to move weapons, to reinforce positions, to plan their next moves. That's strategically insane. And Republicans know it. GOP hawks. People like Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton, Marco Rubio, they understand military strategy, and they're looking at this deal and seeing disaster because when the ceasefire ends in 10 days, one of two things happens. Either it gets extended, which makes Trump look even weaker because it proves he can't actually end the conflict, or fighting resumes and Hezbollah is in a better position than they were before because Trump gave them time to prepare. Either outcome is bad. Either outcome makes the situation worse than if Trump had never brokered the ceasefire at all. That's catastrophic, and Republicans are right to call it out. The political disaster.
Trump brokered this deal because he's desperate for a political win. His approval is in the low 40s. The midterms are coming. Americans are tired of Middle East conflicts, and Trump needs to show he can de-escalate, that he's not just a warmonger who starts conflicts he can't finish. So he rushed this ceasefire. He made concessions to get it done quickly. He prioritized the announcement, the photo op with Netanyahu and Aoun at the White House, over the actual substance of the agreement. And it shows the deal is already falling apart. Violations are happening. The parties aren't actually committed, and Trump looks weak as a result. And this creates a political problem for Republicans running in 2026 because now they have to defend a foreign policy that looks unsuccessful. They have to explain why Trump started a conflict with Iran, why thousands died in the Israel-Hezbollah fighting, and why the result is a weak ceasefire that gives concessions to terrorists. That's not a winning message.
That's not something you run on in competitive districts, so Republicans are faced with a choice. Defend Trump and tie themselves to this catastrophic deal or distance themselves and risk angering Trump's base. Neither option is good. And that's why you're seeing GOP attacks, because Republicans are trying to create space between themselves and Trump's foreign policy before it drags them down in November. And Democrats are going to hammer this relentlessly. They're already talking about how Trump's endless Middle East escalations are exhausting Americans, how his Iran strategy has no clear endgame, how he's putting American lives at risk for no clear benefit. And now they can add, and when he finally tries to end it, he makes a weak deal that gives concessions to terrorists. That's devastating campaign messaging, especially when combined with everything else going wrong for Trump. The low approval, the impeachment talk, the court losses, all of it paints a picture of a failed presidency, and this Lebanon ceasefire is just one more piece of evidence.